Hello again, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up on the hazardous weather graphic, we've got a warning, high wind warning out for the Alaska Range, and that kicks into effect at about 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, and lasts throughout the day Sunday and all of Sunday night until early Monday morning. And that's for winds to increase late tonight and especially tomorrow. They'll be increasing from the southeast with gusts as high as 70 miles an hour all through this area. Wind advisory out for the northern Kuskokwim Valley, and that's mostly up near the Alaska Range, and that's for south and southeast winds that'll be picking up in gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour. And those advisories are out for about the same time period tomorrow through tomorrow night, and actually until 10 a.m. Monday morning. Moving on to fire danger, a couple of small areas here. One real small area, it looks like it's on the north side, or it is on the north side of the Alaska Range, possibly around the Healy area in that stretch on up from, say, Healy on up on down the highway there, the Dehne Highway. And it's kind of a very narrow area there, but it's is higher than the more larger area up over the upper Yukon Valley there, again along the Yukon River, Porcupine River, where the two connect. And that's barely into the high fire danger zone there. And from that, moving on to satellite imagery, you can see with some dry weather, a little bit of sunshine up there in the northeast today, allowing a return to the high fire danger to rise up a little bit there. And pretty nice here down across the Tok Northway area, just an increase in the clouds throughout the day, but dry conditions. First batch of moisture in across a fair portion of the southwest interior. Areas of light rain with that, even along the North Gulf Coast. Panhandle basically dry today, except for some moisture slipping on in from the west there into the northern areas from the North Gulf Coast, associated with this weakening trough, actually remnants of yesterday's system, and that front drifting into that area. And then we've got the much stronger storm pulling northeastward here to a position at mid-afternoon Saturday, just southwest of Nikolsky, right there, and it's deepening, and that bringing a fair amount of rain and an increase in the winds here to the, of course, Fox Islands up to the Alaska Peninsula, with Nikolsky seeing wind gusts to 50 miles an hour this afternoon, and on Alaska picking up about half an inch of rain. Falls Pass also seeing half an inch of rain in the 12-hour period ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon, with Cold Bay gusts 40 miles an hour, and see some stronger winds moving in there tonight as that low continues to deepen, especially when it gets north of the Alaska Range, or north of the Alaska Peninsula, or into the Bering Sea. There, as it moves north, that'll help and aid the forcing of those winds. And that's a pretty good wind setup for a place like Cold Bay to see some pretty good wind gusts tonight when that moves on in. Otherwise, moisture streaming up into Bristol Bay, third of an inch of rain falling this afternoon at King Salmon, while moisture also about quarter of an inch into Iliamna there, only 200s of Kodiak rain just starting there in the afternoon, about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Otherwise, some light rain up along the North Gulf Coast here, and areas of light precipitation back in the west, but dry in the northwest areas. North Slope mostly dry, as well as the Arctic coast. Not even any fog I could see at any of the reporting, none of the reporting stations up there carried fog this afternoon, just clouds and pretty good conditions. On the chart, here's that system coming up just southwest of Nikolsky, and the heavy rain and gusty winds associated with it, with moderate rain spreading up the south side of the Alaska Peninsula, and light rain into Kodiak Island, southern Cook Inlet, or lighter rain across Bristol Bay. And then more showery conditions here, kind of a weak trough up through this area. This one lifting up to the North Gulf Coast, getting about 1/1600ths of an inch. That's one of the heavier amounts there at Cordova. And just some sprinkles there along the northern panhandle, mostly along the coast. Dry over the northeast interior. Actually, all of the northern interior pretty dry today, even the Seward Peninsula. A couple of light showers there on the south coast of the peninsula, but precipitation free and actually fog free through the Bering Strait down into St. Lawrence Island, as well as the Pribilofs there. Those winds are starting to pick up this afternoon, just barely starting to blow, and you'll see a significant increase in the winds across the Pribilofs. In fact, all of the eastern Bering Sea will see a big increase in the winds on Sunday. Moving on to the forecast for tonight, we still have this pesky trough here along the North Gulf Coast, keeping a threat of some moisture in over the northern panhandle. Variably cloudy on down to the south, better chance of seeing clearing the farther south you get toward Dixon Entrance. Dry over the northern interior, isolated showers in Lotto Hills, and again persisting out here, maybe even increasing a little bit there for the Bering Strait to possibly reaching St. Lawrence Island. Otherwise, big storm moving into the southeast Bering Sea, crossing the eastern Aleutians tonight, down to 979 millibars, and winds really wrapping in on the backside of that system. Gale force definitely here from the Pribilofs down, sweeping. Could see some storm force gusts there crossing the the eastern Aleutians late tonight, and also could see gusts maybe 70 miles an hour ahead of that front along the channeled areas of the Alaska Peninsula. Rain heavy at times here on the upslope side, which would be the south side of the terrain into the Aleutian Range, with pretty strong winds as well, south-southeast, possibly gusting 50 to 70 miles an hour through the mountain passes there, higher elevations, and even pretty windy at the lower elevations, with wind and rain trying to increase there at Kodiak Island, and areas of rain across all of southern Alaska now into the northern panhandle. Dry to the south, dry to the north. Outlook for tomorrow, system moves up to Kuskokwim Bay, starts to fill a little bit there, but still some pretty strong northwest winds turning westerly from the Pribilofs westerly and across the Alaska Peninsula, turning southwest, and then southerlies. Very windy day coming up for south central Alaska, especially the higher elevations. Could see 40, 60 mile an hour wind gusts through the passes, especially on the Alaska Range there, with moderate to heavy amounts of rain from the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula. Could pick up several inches, and on up to the upslope areas of the western Alaska Range, moderate rainfall, and then that cutting off pretty good in the Copper River Basin, but look for an increase in those winds. Be a windy day there right along the Copper River. Gulkana could see gusts 40 miles an hour, and of course the high wind warning out for the eastern Alaska Range. Dry northern interior. Band of light precipitation moving up into the, actually across the Tanana Valley to about the White Mountain areas there, but temperatures still forecast to rise into the 70s. And let's jump to Monday, that front really weakens, pushes into the northern panhandle. Rainfall won't be nearly as heavy, but that'll spread into the central areas, staying mostly dry to the south, but cloudy. Moderate showers continue along the North Gulf Coast. A couple of low centers now, that main system moving in. We get one forming over here. Cloudy, showery conditions, eastern interior, chilly and rainy up here in the northeast with that trough. And a lot of rain, widespread area of rain from the Susitna Valley all the way back out to the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, diminishing over Bristol Bay. Good westerly flow here coming across the Bering Sea, carrying a couple of troughs, but they're farther back to the west. The Aleutians under the influence of high pressure. And for the lows tonight, mid-50s there for Bristol Bay with the wind and rain, pretty mild, and mid-40s farther to the west, mid-30s up along the Arctic coast into the North Slope to near 40 in the Brooks Range. Otherwise, 40s there, Tanana Valley, lower 50s, Seward Peninsula, 50s for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow, 68 to 72 here up over the eastern and northeast interior. Not too bad back to the west there, Noatak Valley, 65 to 70, and Kenai Peninsula well into the 60s, pushing 70 down over the southern southeast coast. Lows Monday morning looking like this, 50s. Really not much change from what we'll see tomorrow morning, except cooler in Bristol Bay. So the highs 65 to 70 central interior, and 60s down to the south, near 40 along the Arctic coast, with the Panhandle still pushing 70 there in the southern areas, but again that front dragging into the north be a little cooler and wetter, so highs upper 50s to lower 60s, lower 50s Pribilof, St. Lawrence Island, mid 50s for the Alaska Peninsula, and again lower 40s up along the North Slope into the Brooks Range.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic here showing IFR across the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula up to southern Kodiak Island, and into the southern Bering Sea, northward across Pribilof, St. Matthew Island. Then VFR here along the southwest coast of Nunivak Island on up to the Bering Strait, and nothing but VFR up to the north, all the way to the Arctic coast. IFR, Susitna Valley to the Alaska Range on down into northern and central Cook Inlet, marginal VFR Kenai Peninsula, IFR Gulf of Alaska, Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast, and along the north coast of the Panhandle. Tomorrow afternoon, IFR, Northern Panhandle, marginal VFR, central areas becoming VFR down south toward Dixon Entrance. IFR up into the Wrangell Mountains, Yakutat, Cape Yakataga into maybe Valdez, on over to Passage Canal, south side of the Kenai Peninsula, down to Kodiak Island, marginal VFR Cook Inlet, and up along and south and west, or south and east of the Alaska Range here. IFR, a little less extensive, but in across Togiak Bay in the southwest mountains, up across Nunivak Island to St. Lawrence Island along the Yukon Delta coast. Marginal though, all the way into possibly the southern Kuskokwim Valley. VFR, Tanana, Upper Yukon, Koyukuk, Kobuk, Selawik Valleys, North Slope, Brooks Range, all looking good tomorrow afternoon. IFR, right just grazing the central Arctic coast and marginal out west. And then for Monday morning, another batch of IFR out here coming in western Aleutians, Bering Sea, marginal elsewhere. Some spotty areas of IFR here from the Alaska Range, northeast Bristol Bay, on back out towards St. Lawrence Island, socked in with IFR, North Slope, all the way to the crest of the Brooks Range, out to the Arctic coast. VFR holds over the central interior onto the east, and also IFR here holding western Cook Inlet, as well as Prince William Sound, the North Gulf Coast, IFR, all of the Panhandle. And for the afternoon, retreating back to VFR there, say for Ketchikan, Annette, Metlakatla, Stewart, Hyder, those areas, but out along the coast, Prince of Wales Island, IFR, and the northern, roughly half of the Panhandles be IFR into the afternoon, as well as the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, on up across northern Cook Inlet, Matanuska Valley, Susitna Valley, IFR, marginal VFR up to the Alaska Range. Upper Tanana Valley, 40 Mile Country looks VFR, IFR Arctic Coast, IFR Yukon Delta to St. Lawrence Island, and mostly IFR out over the Bering Sea, passes Anatuvik and Adigan, both VFR tomorrow. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, lowest conditions in the morning, trending toward marginal VFR in the afternoon. Rainy though, probably IFR all day long. And windy, marginal VFR, lowest conditions, probably be IFR on the southern entrance, better on the north side, maybe even VFR. And for Isabel, IFR becoming marginal. And for Mintasta, IFR also becoming marginal VFR in the afternoon. Tanita, marginal VFR at times throughout the entire day. And Portage, IFR trending toward marginal, so a little better conditions coming in during the afternoon Sunday. Chilkoot and White, IFR. Freezing levels, 12,000 feet right up to the Kenai Peninsula, 6,000 feet eastern North Gulf Coast. Colder air coming southward, feeding in that big storm, helping to develop it as it moves northward. And icing, big batch here across, roll from the Gulf of Alaska, areas of considerable moderate here in the orange shaded areas. Terrain enhancement, Alaska Range, same thing, Southwest Mountains. Seward Peninsula could see some moderate as well, 6,000 to 9,000 feet or higher, especially down here toward the Gulf of Alaska. Jet stream, upper low tracking northeastward, strong southwest jet, 130 knots there, accompanied with that storm system. That's surface low tracking due north there, up and over some ridging here over the Gulf of Alaska, northwest 50 knots across the Panhandle, and 9,000 feet, 35 knots, south-southwest coming in toward the southeast coast. 40 to 60 knot winds across the western Gulf of Alaska, 70 knots Kodiak Island, and then 60 knotters in across the western Alaska Range, diminishing considerably there in the northeast, becoming more variable. And out to the west, 25 to 30 knot winds sweeping southeastward on the west side of that low. And about the same pattern at 3,000 feet, 45 to 65 knot winds here coming up across Kodiak into the southwest interior. Western Alaska Range, Sparavon, northwest 35 to 45 to 50 there coming in toward the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians. And diminishing out to the west, turbulence, a lot of marginal chop, southern Alaska, Kodiak, Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian, southwest interior, up to the Seward Peninsula.
Hello again, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. And joining us again, talking about the augmented reality sandbox, is Eric Stevens from GINA, the Geographic Information Network of Alaska. And he's actually talking about a project from AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. A lot of acronyms, but some really fun stuff today, right, Eric?
You bet. We've got a learning tool that is a tool that's fun to use, and it really has a relevance to actually daily lives of anyone who goes outside and sees lumpy topography in Alaska. We've got a lot of mountains and such. You know, when I was younger and go on your first hike in the hills, say, you're given, maybe you're in the Boy Scouts or you get at the kiosk at the trailhead, a topographic map, a flat piece of paper with all these lines on it, bullseyes, long lines that curve back on themselves, say, perhaps things that look like this. A quadrangle or a topographic map. We've got here just to illustrate a couple of examples near Denali. Alaska has so much topography, so many mountains. And what are all these lines that we see? It can be tough to know what this means the first time you look at it. What we've got, all these lines represent lines of where the elevation of the topography goes through a certain level above sea level, say that this line represents where the mountains have gone from below 1,000 feet, mean sea level, up through 1,000 feet and above. That's your 1,000-foot contour. And when the mountain keeps going up, you're up to 1,200 feet, 1,400 feet, and so on. And that's how you get this little bullseye around the peak of a mountain.
Kind of makes layered slices, right?
Kind of like layered slices. Nice way to look at that. And when you see the lines are closer together, you're going up more steeply. If the mountain rises more slowly, it takes you longer in horizontal space to go through those different vertical increments. So
that is really hard to visualize.
Right. Imagine you're looking at a 2D piece of paper, two-dimensional piece of paper, but you're trying to understand what the three-dimensional world looks like. Well, enter the augmented reality sandbox. Yes, what is that? It is right here. We have the sandbox with us today, Sandbox 2.0, portable version. Built up at University of Alaska Fairbanks. And we've got a couple of folks helping out today.
Let's see, Alana Valaji, and she's a mechanical engineering student from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If you want to give us a thumbs up there, Alana, thanks for helping us out today. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator from AKwx, also helping us out today. Thanks, Courtney. And
this tool here has a Microsoft Kinect to sense the level of sand in this sandbox. And then the Kinect feeds its information into a computer that then sends a signal to a projector to draw the appropriate topographic lines on this topography. The fun thing about this, as we can see here, is that the sandbox and its Kinect and its projector, they all work as a team. So here we've got a mountain in the middle of the sandbox. What if we took down the mountain to some degree? Watch as the software responds and redraws the topography.
Kind of a caldera forming there.
There you go, And what's fun about the sandbox too is it knows that gravity flows downhill, and we've got some water that's actually down in the lowest elevations. And what's happening now is we're making it rain a little bit. We'll fill up rain into that elevated lake bed, that caldera, as you said. And so now water is pooled up there. And what if you gouged out an outlet channel?
Glacial dam release.
There you go. The water flows out. What we're seeing here is a tool that allows people to touch and connect, Microsoft Connect, RRR, to connect two-dimensional topographic maps like what we have here, these flat things on a piece of paper, to the real three-dimensional world. I think this sandbox's real particular application as a learning tool to young people is, what does a two-dimensional map mean when it's trying to represent the three-dimensional world? This sandbox is kind of both at once. It's actually three-dimensional, lumpy topography there, the sand, but it's got these lines drawn on the three-dimensional sand that would be on a two-dimensional piece of paper.
Wow, that is a huge leap from the learning that we experienced when we were younger to how children and even adults are visualizing in these new forms of technology. Allows that to kind of reshape their thinking and visualize this in a very useful and absolutely hands-on way. It's amazing.
It's a hands-on tool. And
it's hard for me to sit here and not go play with that.
well, that's what happened at Dehne, up at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, when the first model was being made, the prototype with plywood and such. We had professional adult professor types had heard about this, and they came by because they wanted to see how it worked.
Okay.
And everyone becomes that idealistic, wonder-filled youngster.
Sure.
And you just can't help but play with that and to see how it reacts in time, and it's a dynamic learning tool, and it responds.
That's exactly the word.
And you wonder what applicabilities beyond a teaching tool for topography can it have. You can see how in Alaska we have inundation mapping is an issue. If you had water slosh inland, say in a coastal flooding event on the western coast of Alaska or the Arctic coast, you could see this. The concept is illustrated here as an introductory learning method. I think this is a potentially good outreach tool for all of us in Alaska.
Okay, so not only just a topographical sense, a mapping sense, maybe something that leads into understanding of how geographic information systems work with GIS, but also geology, if we wanted to get into kind of the formations and the bigger land masses and the representation of the 2D map. We could go into hydrology, which is very important in Alaska, of course. And even just understanding the weather sense. Mounding up a big pile of sand could be that Arctic high pressure system sitting on top of Fairbanks, and the voids would be low pressure systems. This can go a lot of different directions.
Yes, exactly. It's not just landforms, but pressure has contours of high pressure and low pressure. And I wish I had this kind of a learning tool when I was taking Meteorology 101 back 25 years ago.
Wow.
It would have been helpful, I think.
Probably would have gotten a better grade. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for coming by, Eric, and Alana and Courtney. Thank you so much for your help there in the sandbox. We are going to play in the sandbox a little bit more coming up tomorrow on our next edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We hope you join us for that. In the meantime, make sure you go to alaska.edu/EPSCOR. That's alaska.edu. EPSCOR to learn more information about what we're doing with this augmented reality sandbox around Alaska. We'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Facts.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, not much different from what we saw yesterday or the day before. Ice edge out through this area still sagging southward a little bit with whatever ice pulls away melting as it moves into the higher sea surface temperatures of the Chukchi Sea. And just a slow thaw expected to continue for the through this area with the heavier ice holding without much change at all. But general trend that we've seen for the last 4 or 5 days expected for the next 4 or 5. And for the marine forecast, coastal water forecast, northwest 25 on the south coast here, turning west at 20, and then southwest 15 farther to the north. Lynn Canal, 25 knot small craft advisories tomorrow. Light southwest 10 for Stevens Passage, northwest 15 for Clarence Strait. And west 15 for Clarence Strait on Monday, but Lynn Canal, south 35, gust 45, gale force winds, gale warnings out for Monday there with 25 knots for Stevens Passage, southwest 20 on the south coast, and southwest 20 to 25 north side with 12 to 13 foot seas. Prince William Sound east 25 knots, small craft advisories there with 4 foot seas. Southeast 30 for the North Gulf Coast, 8 to 10 foot seas. Gales for the Barrens 35 out of the southeast, 40 knots for Kamishak Bay and Southern Cook Inlet. Gale warning southeast 35 but only east of 15 north of the Forelands. South 25 to 30 knots, south-southwest for Cook Inlet on Monday, southwest 30 knots for Kamishak Bay, the Barren Islands, western North Gulf Coast, 25 knot winds there around Middleton, in that Middleton Island zone, south 20 for Prince William Sound. Kodiak tomorrow, south to southeast, 40 knots, both sides, Shelikof Strait, all around the island there with seas approaching 20 feet. Sitkinak to Castle Cape, south 45 knots, 22 foot seas. Storm warnings from Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev, southwest 50, south 45, 19 foot seas, north side of the peninsula. Bristol Bay, southeast at 40 with 14 foot seas. Gales hold there, swinging around out of the west now. Westerlies 40 knots for Bristol Bay, 15 foot seas. South or west-southwest 35 for Kodiak, 30 knot winds here, Sitkinak to Castle Cape, and then gales continue on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula out of the west with 16 foot seas. Light winds out over the western Aleutians for tomorrow with 25-knot winds. Winds coming down to 25 here in the central Aleutians, 11-foot seas, and then 40 to 45-knot westerlies for Unalaska Island with those seas anywhere from 18 to 24 feet. Gales back to Nikolsky and Umak Island. And then for Monday, lighter winds now. Unalaska Island west 20 to 25 knots, 15 to 20 there for Umak Island. Central Aleutians 15 to 20 out of the west, and west-southwest light winds 15 knots for the western areas. And the southwest coast for tomorrow, south of Nunivak Island, east 40 knots there, and then good northwest winds the backside of that low center here, 40 to 45 knots from St. Matthew Island right on down across the Pribilof, so seas building to 17 feet. North 35, Yukon Delta coast, northeast 30 for St. Lawrence Island, turning east in Norton Sound. 25 in Norton Sound on Monday. Gales out of the north here for St. Lawrence Island, and west 35 to 40 knots, northern Bering Sea, 40 knots along the southwest coast right into Kuskokwim Bay, and west 30 for the Pribilofs. Light west winds for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast tomorrow, northwest 15 central coast. Small craft advisories here on the west side, all the way down to Wales out of the northeast for 30-knot winds. And then we've got gales here from Wales all the way up to Cape Beaufort, north-northeast 35, 30 knots, dropping down to 15 here along the central and eastern coast, and even lighter toward Demarcation Point. For tonight, again, this strong storm moving or tracking north-northeast into the southeast Bering Sea, front into eastern Bristol Bay, strong winds, heavy rain ahead of that front, spreading up into the southern Kuskokwim Valley, and into south central Alaska, across the Copper River Basin, areas of rain, not too heavy, really just sprinkles into the northern panhandle. And tomorrow, system lifts into Kuskokwim Bay or around there somewhere, and strong winds, south central Alaska, southern Alaska, especially through the mountain passes, heavy rain, southern Kenai Peninsula coast up into western Prince William Sound, moderate rain, upslope areas of the western Alaska Range, dry with some sunshine farther to the north. Sprinkle chances over the northern panhandle to maybe some sunshine down south. And then that front pushes eastward, a much weakened front with some rain into the northern panhandle, cool, cloudy, wet weather over southern Alaska. A little bit better back to the north and northwest for your day on Monday. Thank you for joining us.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.